Hi there, this is Elise Benin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. One of the things I love most about the work I do with creative professionals is that I get to see their creativity in action. I've designed the simplest marketing plan framework with a lot of a wiggle room so you can bring your own creativity to the business side of your business, which means everyone who uses this framework gets to make it their own. So in today's episode of the Marketing Mentor podcast, I talked with Florian Schleicher, a marketing advisor and strategist, about how, when he decided to invest in his business by working with me, in 1 year, he has used these 3 simple tools, content marketing, strategic networking, and targeted outreach, to achieve more than he imagined possible so quickly. Because, as I keep saying, marketing works when you put in the effort, when you do it. So listen and learn. Hello, Florian. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be talking with you again, Elise. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Florian Schleicher. I'm a marketing strategist focused on sustainable growth. And before starting my own marketing studio, I worked for 3 big brands, McDonald's, Greenpeace, and the food waste initiative Too Good To Go. And now with my marketing studio Futures, I help companies, big and small, with their strategy when it's no longer working. And I do this with coachings, workshop, and the Simple and Sustainable Marketing Academy.
Beautiful. And how long have you been in business as a solo?
Yeah, so as a solopreneur, I am just celebrating my 2-year anniversary in a month.
Congratulations.
So yeah, that's going to be a big step for me.
Yeah, and you have an accent. Your English is excellent, but you do have an accent. So tell us where you are, and actually maybe also how marketing might be different where you are.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Austria. I live in Vienna, in the middle of Europe. And I totally understand that I have an accent. But yeah, so I've been working in marketing for the past 15 years. And what I observed also working with a lot of big brands is that there are certain areas in the world where marketing is a little bit different. There is for sure the European area that is fairly similar to the US area too. And then there's, of course, Asia, South America, the Pacific, and Africa. So what I think is different compared to the US and Europe is that in Europe, people are not that keen on being the first doing something. So that's very interesting. When I worked at Too Good To Go, for example, and it was a startup. So at the very beginning, we had to convince stores, supermarkets to join in on the fight on food waste. And the challenge was no supermarket and no partner wanted to be first. In Europe, everybody wants to be the second one using something when it's already established. And I think that's a big difference compared to the US, where it's good to be first and where there's also like a culture where it's more okay to fail also.
And are your clients mostly then in Europe or elsewhere?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm super proud working with a lot of international brands and entrepreneurs. My focus is, of course, Europe, because that's where I know most people and where I've built my career. But I also now have 2 entrepreneurs from the US. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm. And you came to me last year and we worked together on your own marketing, and I shared with you the tools from the simplest marketing plan. And you, I think I would say, unlike most of my clients, literally just took it and ran with it in a way that I have never seen before, which is why I wanted to invite you onto the podcast. So would you talk about, I'll just say what those tools are for people who don't know, and then maybe you can share a little bit how you're using them and how it's going. So the first tool is high quality content marketing. The second tool is strategic networking in person and in real life, if possible, and in real time. And the third tool is targeted outreach. So I think you're doing all three of those. I'm curious how you have made them your own and how you integrate them into your business.
Yeah, sure. And I'm so happy we started working, I think it was like 10 months ago, because back then I had a challenge. The first year was perfect. I had so much progress, worked with a lot of brands. And then beginning of 2023, I felt like I was missing out on something. The market got a little bit more complicated and I struggled, as a lot of entrepreneurs probably do. And what you mentioned also was this feast and famine culture.
Right.
And it seemed that I was heading towards a famine phase. And I was a little bit frightened about this. And I saw two options. So option one was keeping the money that I have saved also close to be safe for a famine phase, or to reinvest it and trying to learn something new from an experienced mentor, which you turned out to be. And I was super happy doing that because right now it's beginning of winter 2023. My business has never been growing better. I feel super confident about the next phases and I've learned so much. So let's dive into those three things that you mentioned. And so first was the high quality content, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So I started writing a newsletter, I think now almost a year ago, and it gained some traction. And when we began working with each other, I already had the newsletter. It was going great. Back then, I think I had like 500 followers, readers. That was great. And what you suggested was to reuse elements of the newsletter also for different channels. So I repurposed them on LinkedIn also. I used them in my presentations. But the biggest change that I did was, and that was a recommendation from you, to start a podcast. So the recording we're now doing is a crossover episode. You publish it on your podcast. I'm going to publish it on mine. And starting the podcast, I also mentioned it to you. Where do I get the time to do that from? Because it takes a lot of time to start this thing, to come up with the questions. You have to prepare. You have to reach out to people. Maybe you have to do the post-production. Maybe you can outsource it. And I still remember you telling me, how often do you write a newsletter? And back then it was a weekly newsletter. So I changed to a only every other week newsletter. And in the new time that I gained from that, I did the podcast. And the podcast was hugely beneficial also for a more targeted outreach, which I think is like the third thing you mentioned from the simple marketing plan, because it enabled me to get into contact with a lot of very interesting people. And it's always different knocking on somebody's door and saying, hey, do you want to have a chat with me? I'm this marketing strategist guy. Most of people would say, yeah, I don't have time for that. But knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, I really like what you're doing with your brand and with your marketing and your strategy. Do you want to talk about that on my podcast? So that was very good to get into contact with people. Obviously, you still need to do the work, but it also enabled and it showed to other people that I can do more than just write a newsletter, because at the end of the day, people need to be aware of who this person is. And you and I reached out to you because I heard you speaking on another person's podcast, on Jenny Blake's podcast, Free Time.
Yeah.
So I think in the coaching business, which we are both in, it's very important to get a feeling on how this person really is.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to show off with a podcast.
And I totally agree with you. I love the idea of a podcast as the nexus of the three tools. Basically, they all come together because what you produce is high quality content. When you reach out to someone and say, hey, you want to be on my show? No one would say no to that, basically. And it's a networking opportunity because even if nothing else comes out of the conversation, you get to know another person who might be a prospect, might be a referral source. So that actually just brings me to, who are the people you invite to be on your podcast?
Yeah. So my main area is marketing, strategy, and sustainability. So the people I invite are marketing managers, heads of brands, heads of strategy from corporations, maybe startups, maybe some small businesses who have a track record of doing great stuff with their marketing. So
actually, let me just interrupt you there. So do you see them as prospects, or do you see them as, I don't know, colleagues who are doing great things with their marketing, and you might think, well, why would they need me?
So honestly, I invite them because I would like to chat with them, because I really like learning from other people. And those are the people that I invite. I want to learn how they run their business, how they run their organization, what they do with their marketing strategy, and how they approach the topic of sustainability. So it's not so much about that they could be prospects for me, but when you're a solopreneur, when you run your own business, it's also a little bit lonely from time to time. And exchanging thoughts with other thoughts leaders, that's really inspiring for me. And I don't keep track on who then joins in as a client or who just becomes a person that I enjoy having a cup of coffee with. But it's a way to build a relationship with other experts for me.
You know, one thing I love about that, Florian, is that it seems like the lines are very blurry in your mind and in your network, which I think is a good thing. Often we think blurry lines are not great, but I think people compartmentalize a little too much. Like, oh, this is a prospect, and this is a referral source, and this is a client. But it sounds like everyone in your network kind of maybe goes back and forth between these things, or at least has the opportunity or the potential to. So someone who's a guest on your podcast could become a client, or could join your academy, which we'll talk about, or could pass your name along, and you're not keeping track of who's doing what. You are just trusting that the system works, the strategy and the process works. Is that accurate?
Exactly. And I don't remember where I read this quote, or maybe I heard it from somewhere, but there is this quote of, you can't compete with someone having fun. So what I strive with my newsletter, where I currently have more than 1,000 subscribers, or with my podcast, or also on LinkedIn, I want to produce content that I would enjoy if I would see it somewhere else or listen to it somewhere else. So I'm having fun while I'm doing this. And I think the success rate so far, it shows that that strategy is also working.
And so when you say the success rate, what are you referring to there? Let's talk about results. And I think you haven't really talked too much yet about strategic networking also. So just integrate that. How do you do your networking? Because I know you're out there a lot, presenting and attending events. And so how does that all fit in?
Yeah. So important note, I'm an introvert.
No. That's not possible, Florian.
So yes, I think it's possible, because what I really enjoy is intimate conversations like the one we're having right now, one-on-one conversations, maybe one-on-two conversations. But whenever there's a big crowd, I feel drained afterwards. I'm so low on energy. So I'm really not good at going to big networking events and then standing in the middle of the crowd. I don't know what to do with myself there. And I'm not the kind of person who then approaches other people. So what I do is I'm very selective on the events that I'm going to. And I've made this rule for myself that I only go to events if I'm invited to speak there, or if there's an opportunity to speak there. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be on a stage or have to be part of the discussion on the stage. But maybe there's a very interesting small circle event where I could get into contact with people by just asking questions, raising a hand during the conversations on stage and joining in. So what I really need in order to feel comfortable at a networking event is the opportunity to having a say in what's being discussed.
So the topic, the substance of the meeting is important to you.
So I want to contribute to it in any way and use it also, of course, to position myself. Like I had this fall, I think I already had 6 speaking engagements.
Wow.
And it was great because even if it's just a 10-minute presentation, people come up to you afterwards and say, hey, let's have a chat. And it's the same as with the podcast. Whenever somebody approaches me, I don't think, okay, this could be a great new client. I'm just interesting. I'm curious, okay, what's going to happen if I keep talking to that person? If I reach out to that person a month later, what can happen from these serendipitous events?
I love that. It's related to something I've been saying a lot lately about enjoying surprises, that we have to shift our mindset to one of what could happen. Let's see what happens if I do this, as opposed to, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I have no idea what's going to happen and I'm terrified, right? Like that's a choice.
Yeah. And I think if you approach things with the mindset of, I'm curious what will happen if I do this, then you can very much be surprised by it in a good way. And also, like, I also do tests that then fail. And it's also okay. I think it's important to define how much energy you put into something new if you're curious about what's going to happen. And then if it works, okay, put some more energy into it. And if it doesn't work, it's a data point. It shows you something was not successful and you can learn from it.
So let's come back then to success, because I asked you several questions all at once. One of them was about success and failure, which you've mentioned. So people always love to hear examples of failure, something that failed. So maybe you can give us a success and a failure.
Yeah. So let's start with the failure.
All right.
So the failure was end of last year, end of 2022. I read a lot about courses and academy formats and learning journeys where an experienced coach offers some kind of a course for people to learn from. So I thought, okay, that's a great business model. I think I would like to do something that myself. So I started something, and what I did was I offered a 2-month course, which had a 2-hour every week session. I plan to have a small circle of 4 to 6 founders or marketing leaders there. And it had a very high ticket price. So the ticket entry price was above 1,000 euros or dollars. And I pushed it through my newsletter. I pushed it on LinkedIn. I told a lot of people about it. I got a lot of positive feedback. And in the end, nobody booked it.
Nobody.
So I was frustrated, but I also thought, okay, there's something in there, and I don't yet understand why it did not work, because I still think that the program was great and it had a lot of potential, but something wasn't right. So then I started reading back then a book by Dory Clark. I think I mentioned it to you in one of the first sessions, where she also said she's also a strategist and advisor, and she also launched a course format. And also at her first course, nobody signed up. And I felt really happy reading that, not because I was, not because
Schadenfreude, don't they call that Schadenfreude?
Not because of Schadenfreude, but because I was relieved. Okay, this super successful person that I admire, she also had it tough when she started.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, I'll come back to this learning format, maybe in a couple of months. I'm not going to push it because it was a disappointment. So yeah, that was a failure.
And that happened before we started working together,
Yes,
if I remember
exactly.
correctly.
That was in December, January last year. So then we started working together and we focused a lot first on the content part, on the outreach part, on the networking part. I learned a lot about structuring my business also, because still, like, after working for 15 years as an employee, I was a very professional employee. But at the beginning, I was not a professional entrepreneur.
Exactly. It's a mindset you have to really learn.
Yes. And then I think it was in one of the last 2 sessions, I explained the example of this failed course format to you. And I asked you, okay, any recommendations what I could change to run another test? And you explained how your simplest marketing plan works. And so I thought, okay, that sounds really interesting. I think there's definitely something in there, like success rates also show that it's working for you. And so I then got back to the drawing board. I striked out a lot of things that I had in the first course format. And I thought, okay, let's make it really simple, because I loved what you're doing with the simplest marketing plan. And then I thought, okay, what's my business about? It's about marketing. It's about sustainability. And it's also about, like, I want to help people to make simple decisions, because strategies, they sound super complicated because a lot of people don't understand what strategy really means. So I thought, okay, maybe I can call it the Simple and Sustainable Marketing Academy. And I started this test in July or August this year. And currently we're in the first batch. I have 32 participants in there. Wow. I lowered the price point drastically. So the entry ticket is now at about 100 euros or $100. And that's a super great success story, because it failed first and then I changed a lot of things. I also thought, okay, who's my target audience for that really? And what's the problem of my target audience? And for a lot of founders or young marketing managers, it's that they don't have a lot of budget for their learning. So lowering the price point and downscaling the academy format really was what made it so successful now. And I'm currently in the process of starting the promotion for the next batch, which is going to be starting in February next year in 2024. And I already have some people who have pre-signed up for that. Awesome. So yeah, I'm very happy about that.
And I'm curious, how are you improving it for the next round? Are there specific things you're going to do differently, or things that just didn't work out that you're going to leave out?
Yeah, so a couple of things. And I think that's great as an entrepreneur, because you can just look at what worked and what didn't work and just run another test. So for the first run, there were 2 ticket categories. There was a basic category with the 4 presentations, so 1 each month, and a co-working Slack community. And then there was the pro version, the personal version, as I called it, where there also were 2 Ask Me Anything sessions for the smaller group and an individual one-on-one 60-minute session with me. And so a lot of people booked both packages, but I thought, okay, maybe there could be something in the middle, because being now in the process with the group, I see that those Ask Me Anything sessions in a small group settings are really helpful for people, because they get in a more intimate setting with me. Again, I enjoy more intimate settings because of my introversion. And people get together as a group and they also figure out, hey, I can learn something from that person. And I think that's really beneficial for everybody. So there will be now a mid-tier where there's an additional Ask Me Anything session. And also I wanted to upgrade the pro version. And so next time I'll have an external guest speaker there, because I'm talking about strategy. And then this expert, he's going to be talking about how to really use marketing in the digital channels. And I'm not big into operational stuff. I'm really big on this high level picture strategy stuff. So I think that's a very good added value to have somebody else also in there who can give a different perspective and show people what else is there. And also it's good because it's a networking opportunity again. So this guest speaker, he's also going to promote the pro version, of course. So it enables me to reach an additional target audience that I might be not able yet to reach. So those are some of the things that I'm going to change for the second run.
That sounds great. And how is your one-on-one coaching business going?
Yeah, so that's really awesome. I started with this actually because one of my previous employees back at Too Good To Go, when I announced that I'm going to start my own business, she said, what I loved most working with you, Florian, was our one-on-one sessions. I always put a lot of emphasis on enabling my team to do their best job. And I just love working with people, helping them to solve problems and guiding them. So that's why I integrated it into my business now, this coaching part. Mm-hmm. And how it works now, I send out a questionnaire, people sign up, then they choose a package of their liking. And what I really like is getting in touch with so many different kinds of people. Like I'm sure you can relate to that because I'm working with heads of marketing there. I'm also working with founders. I'm working with consultants there from B2B to B2C to SaaS companies. So there's a broad range, and that's really what makes me curious, learning from all those different aspects. Because at the end, in a mentoring or in a coaching format, you always benefit from each other's perspectives. So I also take a lot away from those.
And listening to that, what you just said, someone might say, but then don't you have a niche or a niche? And I know that you do, and you've mentioned it, but it may not have hit as a niche. So would you describe how you perceive your niche?
Yeah, so my niche is definitely sustainability marketing strategies. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of marketing experts out there, really good one. There are a lot of strategists out there, but not a lot of people have a proven track record in sustainability. So having worked for Greenpeace and Too Good To Go, and now I also work for a lot of sustainable companies or companies with sustainability projects, that's my niche. And that was also one of the things that you told me at the very beginning when we looked at my homepage. I can still remember, and you were saying, I don't get that sustainability part. It's written in some words, but it's not really that like in the forefront of things. And so everything that I do now has this sustainability angle in it. And that's also why it's called the Simple and Sustainable Marketing Academy, because I think it's very important to differentiate and to go into a niche. Otherwise, you're just swimming in a very big pool.
Yes. Excellent. All right. A couple more questions for you. First of all, I'm going to ask you the baby step question. So, and it's kind of broad, but of all the things that we've been talking about and that you have shared, can you think of a baby step that listeners can take to move in the direction that you have gone?
So I think what's really important if you have your own business and if you want to advance is to never stop learning. And what my suggestion would be, find something that you think is missing at the moment, whether it's a topic, whether it's a know-how in a specific area. Maybe you're missing somebody you can talk to or you can learn from, and just see what's out there. Maybe there's a good book on it. Maybe there's a course on it. Maybe there's somebody who can teach you something about that. And coming back to what I said at the beginning, being an entrepreneur sometimes is lonely, or you can feel alone. So reach out to people who you know and who maybe know something about the thing you want to learn.
And actually, that seems also related to, I didn't quite realize this actually until you said it today, which is that you were trying to decide, you saw famine coming ahead in 2023, and you could either, kind of protect your savings and hope it you can ride out on it
Mhm.
or invest or reinvest in your business by working with me. And you decided the latter. You took that risk and it seems to have paid off. So I don't know, can you say any more about like what it took to take that risk?
I think it has something to do with being optimistic about the future and having a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, our businesses live from the energy that we put into it. And the other day, I was listening to a very old interview by Jeff Bezos, where he was on Jay Leno's show back then. And Jay Leno was asking, I don't understand the business model of Amazon. You're so big and you're still not having any profits at all. And Jeff Bezos said, yeah, that's because we're reinvesting everything that we're gaining.
Mm.
And looking at Amazon now, it's a highly profitable company. Right. So it definitely paid off. And I think it's definitely a risk reinvesting. But if we don't take risks, how can we learn? Like the first moment a baby tries to walk, it's also a risk of falling. And probably it's going to fall a couple of times. But in the end, it's important to do those steps and it can work. But the thing that's very important, I think, is, and you mentioned it at the beginning, a coach can only help so much and you have to do the steps yourself.
Right.
Like you could have told me, okay, start a podcast, downscale your newsletter, maybe start an academy format. If I didn't use those recommendations, then I think it doesn't make that much sense. And that's why I am also a big fan of giving my clients exercises to do in between sessions. And you're doing the same thing, I know, because it gives a sense of accountability and it helps our clients to make progress.
And it's really the only way to learn, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I can tell you what to do, but unless you start to implement it and experiment with it, you're not going to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. 3 other questions for you, Florian.
Yes.
What is good marketing for you in 3 words?
So I always ask this question my guests. So I had fun preparing for it. And it actually was super easy. So for me, good marketing has to be sustainable, strategic, and simple.
Mm-hmm. Sustainable, strategic, and simple. And you've got some alliteration there, which I always love. Awesome. All right. And what is the future of marketing?
So I'm very much focused on sustainability because I believe that marketing has a superpower, the superpower of manipulation or getting people to buy something, to do something. And I think we can use that superpower for something good, to tell new stories, to take companies as well as customers to a sustainable future. And I think that's the role of marketing. And I hope that we can shift into that direction.
And actually, that reminds me of my answer to the next question, which I'll give before I ask it.
Please.
Because there's a book called Nudge, Nudge, by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, if I remember correctly. And they talk about how marketing and other things are nudges that can be used for good or ill. And I agree with you that, that's a choice as well.
Absolutely. And I've read that book. I really much enjoyed it because it shows you the psychological tricks that brands pull and that can be used for bad things or for good things.
Exactly. All right. So what book have you read recently that you want to recommend?
So I'm currently looking at my bookshelf and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Good.
So I really had a hard time focusing on my own question and giving a straight answer. So I want to recommend 2 books. So first is How to Be Strategic by Fred Pellard, because I really enjoyed the models that he's sharing and how to use them for a strategic planning process. And the second one is Obsessed by Emily Hayward. about how to build brands that everyone loves.
I've never heard of either of those books, so they're now on my list.
Great.
Awesome. Well, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I had a really great time talking with you again, Elise, because I very much enjoyed the whole learning journey that we both have been on and all the things that I've learned from you. So thank you very much for this exchange again. And yeah, I look forward to our next conversation already.
Absolutely. Me too. And so tell the people where they can find you online, Florian.
Yes. So they can just type in ftrs-studio.com. And that's where people can find all about me, my business, my newsletter, my podcast, and so many more things.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned. And I also can't wait for the next time.
Yes. See you.
Bye. Florian's baby step is to never stop learning. And I, of course, agree. He's suggesting you find something that you think is missing, whether it's a topic or a skill or a role in your business, and then see if you can find a book or a course or a coach and get the help you need. So if you want to build a thriving business on your own terms, the first step is to sign up for my quick tips at marketing-mentortips.com. And then once you're on the site, you'll find lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.